serious. All right? Eternal God, Father and Mother of us all, we call on you as the creator of life, the divine spark that ignites the mind and heart of every human being. Through the love of Ken's parents, you kindled in him a creative fire that lit up our lives. To create like you is every artist's calling. To unveil its beauty is his greatest joy. We thank you for Ken Holamon and pray that the visions he created here will be but a preview to the endless feast you want us all to share. Amen.
Amen. joy, as well as the joy of the entire community, that we have been having known Ken and also to have been able to see his wonderful creations, not only among us, in the creation of his love and his friendship, but on that stage, it was just inspiring to be a part of this organization and to count Ken among our friends. I also wanted to let you know that last Tuesday, in recognition of the remarkable contribution that Ken Holamon has made to not only this organization and his audiences, but the entire community, the city of San Jose recognized Ken and dedicated the city council meeting in his name. So I think that's a terrific tribute to Ken, and again, we are blessed. Ken continues to serve San Jose Civic Light Opera and the community in his death, as he did so remarkably in his life. And one of Ken's wishes was to leave his entire set design and scenic library to San Jose Civic Light Opera. So I wanted to let you folks know that as of tomorrow, San Jose Civic Light Opera Board of Directors is establishing the Ken Holamon Library that will continue to serve the community and serve the artistic community in ways that he has always done. So we are very, very grateful to Ken, as always, for his remarkable contribution to our organization and to San Jose.
Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Belleville, and I was very lucky to have worked with Ken in a variety of different ways over the last few years. Tonight I'm going to take the oath of office as the president of the state chancellor local here in this area, level 134. The part of Ken that I am both happiest to have known and saddest to lose is his humor and wit. His humor was what made the work easy. It was infectious, it was constant, and it helped us keep all things in perspective. Ken's humor was left of center. He was an incorrigible punster. And he took great delight in bad puns and double entendre. And you knew he was happiest when you could see not only the twinkle and delight in his eye, but the tongue in his cheek. If you look closely at his picture in the lobby of the theater, you can see that tongue trying to sneak into that cheek. So what I'd like to do now is a group exercise. I'd like you all to put your tongues in your cheeks. 2. All right. And leave them there while I ask you to suspend a bit of disbelief and listen to what I'm about to say. I've had a hard time in the theater this week. My grief hit me pretty hard on Monday. So last night, after the show, I went home and I tied on pretty good. Had a few too many. And Ken came to me in a vision and we had a long talk. He is living backward in time now, just like the character Merlin that he played in Camelot. And he wanted me to give you all a few notes. He wishes there had been just a little more glitz and shits in that corner over there. He loves the mirror bowl. He's working on a new project. He said it was an epic. I didn't write the whole title down, but I do remember it had the word second in it. He also said it was slightly bigger than Phantom. He has a floating timeline, not too much and not too little. And he says the fabric selection is fabulous. Of course, there are no budget restrictions. theater has a straight ramp and a wide dock. And all the scenery is made out of Nerf material. It never hangs up or hurts anybody. The electrics really are two-dimensional. And there are no directors, just assistant directors that stay on book. He said that really the company that he's working in now is not much different from CLO. But the front office is a little bigger. Stuart, I'd like to present this plaque as a work in progress, as a prototype of something to hang in the Holamon Library. On behalf of the stagehands who knew and loved Ken, it says, to designer 157, USA 829, from his brothers and sisters of IATSE, Local 134, in grateful appreciation for all you have done for us.
Civic Light Opera Association will be very pleased to have this in the Holamon Library, what Sonny announced a few moments ago. And each time we look at it, we'll remember the special bond that existed between Ken and all of the union members and indeed all of the members of this company. So thank you very much. Why don't we leave it up here, and a little bit later on we invite you to come up and take a look at it.
Arena of love.
This is now story time, in which you are all invited to tell your stories about Ken. There are several of you who were on the list already. It's about 4 or 5 people. We'll start with them, and then please feel free to approach the microphone or from where you are and tell your story about Ken.
I've spent so much time the last few days thinking about Ken, as all of us have. Most of you, I think, knew Ken very organized, very methodical, exciting always, joyful. I had opportunities to be with Ken on a couple of trips where we would get into puddings. I think it's a term that Irene, you taught him. Puddings, yes, those unexpected moments where you have to just sort of punt and hope that it works out. And so I started thinking about those puddings that I shared with Ken, to sort of share some of those with you. I remember picking Ken up at SFO and getting in my little Volkswagen Bug, and he was learning to drive a stick shift as we drove. And I had blueprints that I was trying to read because we were heading to San Joaquin Delta College to try to build and put up Sherlock Holmes for Al Muller, who's here today. And that was certainly a pudding. We told Al that we would get there and take a look at it, and if we thought we couldn't do it, we'd turn around and go home. Of course, there was never a question of whether we'd turn around and go home. We decided we'd just do it, and we did it. His work turned out somewhat better than mine. I was asked to be the lighting designer, and it was not pretty. I could tell you about wandering the catacombs of Alexandria with Orland and a few other folks and Ken. We had to do it by candlelight because, of course, the day we decided to go to the catacombs, there was no electricity, as periodically there is no electricity in Egypt. And so we traveled the catacombs, and Ken making do again with that experience. I can relate to you the omelet experience, which is now in the annals of history. It's Mont Saint-Michel last April, in which Ken thought that we had a pretty good $20 omelet until I told him that it really was a $200 omelet. It was damn good. Or I could relate to you the day that we spent driving in England, which was the first time Ken had ever tried to drive in England. We had spent a white knuckle trip coming across and white water trip coming across the English Channel. And I spent the next day totally terrified as Ken drove down the left side of the road. And of course, because he was allowing for the fact that he was driving on what he thought was the wrong side of the road, he was constantly up on the curb, which would be on the sidewalk. But the two memories that really flood back to me of our trips together was one on our trip to Egypt when we were in the hypostyle hall, which I guess both of us have come to realize was possibly the most religious place that we'd ever stepped foot in. And those beautiful columns in that space, and Ken's joy and celebration of that beautiful place. And then last April, when he finally got a dream come true, and he got to go and visit the Monet Gardens, and to walk with him through the Monet Gardens and celebrate with him the color and light and beauty of that place, as seen through his eyes, was truly a remarkable experience. So there are a lot of memories of Ken. My friend, we'll miss you a lot.
I suppose only 4 people here have known Ken as long or longer than I have or Irene has. But I know Ken because we don't speak of past tense. It's all present with us all. I know Ken for 28 years. He came to Centenary College at Shreveport in the Marjorie Lyons Playhouse to start his bachelor's degree in theater. Now, you know, it is quite common to have films and plays either about very good teachers or more popularly in recent times, very bad teachers. But I want to remind you of something that's almost never said. It was implied in The Corn is Green 50 years ago. Teachers are lucky if they have a great student. So here's a salute that begins that way with him as student. We all obviously grow and change. Some of us have noticed that very much this afternoon. And we've encountered people through the years whom we've known, with whom we've worked. Ken was certainly not an exception to that, but in one way he was. He not only grew and changed, but he changed little. In that when I first met him, he already knew that he was to be an artist. He was already programmed, much as the people who know racing horses speak of a young foal that as soon as it has its legs, demonstrates a spirit. And that's the one the old men on fences in California watch, or in Kentucky and watch, and say, I'll train that horse. Ken had that quality at 18. Moreover, he did not change direction, unlike almost all the rest of us, including me, but he continued to advance, not only in time and space, but in his skills, and in his craft, and in his insights and awareness. But he always was moving like he were a laser locked onto this matter of being an artist. That is, being one who imagines, who sees anew, who rearranges, and who enables the rest of us to see what he saw. There's an endless variety of anecdotes about Ken. We all have different facets, but you know, they all really come together and make one single image because of this incredible consistency in this young man I'm looking at 18 for a moment. Because he, as when I last spoke to him on the phone, not many days ago, I recognized all of it. That drive, that planning sense, that sense of tomorrow, and the sense of now. Because he did have a remarkable ability, as we all know, to fill the minute, to use a phrase from Kipling, with 60 seconds worth of distance run. More than anybody I know, and those I do know who have that quality, except for Ken, usually can't remember what they're going to do tomorrow. They're so obsessed with the moment. Ken was always a year ahead, and sometimes 2 seasons on, and yet he was able to understand the moment and to use it, whether it was time out for laughter or now's when we do it, and we do it right. And all of us here, in whatever our perspective of Ken, will recognize that sense of now and that sense of tomorrow, and it was all flowing together in one continuum. It was a theme with him: time and art. And there is a relationship between them, though when the exchange is made, the art exists, time goes. He knew that trade. He knew it well. But I remember him first as student. And I remember the very first rehearsal. He came not to act, but in an undergraduate department, the strength is that one may have a chance to do many things and find many possibilities and make better choices. And that's what we tried to do in that department. And right off, Ken was working with Irene on the mounting of a show, Don Quixote, a new version of Don Quixote. A little before, there was a musical called Man of La Mancha. And one of his responsibilities, other than where he was happiest, in the costume and prop department, was also to take a role as a puppeteer. Unseen role, but play a part and manipulate two puppets in the show, within the show, that is a key thing in both the book and the musical that later happened. And when we had the first rehearsal for puppets, and the first time a voice no man, no woman had ever heard erupted from that little puppet stage, as a little princess fled for her life across the little space, everybody reversed hair for a moment. We actually, I thought something dreadful had happened, like somebody had been knifed. It was a preliminary to the cry, "Save me." It was young Holamon. And I decided he was well named. I almost called him Holamon at that point. But actually he electrified the moment, and in 5 minutes that entire scene in that rehearsal had become the central moment of the entire production in the rehearsal phase. It led the whole show. It was that kind of intensity about him. I also remember him 4 years later as Dee Dee in Beckett's Waiting for Godot. And it so happened that I did what I did only once in the 8 years I was at the college. I played a role. I played Estragon, the go-go, and he did the Dee Dee. With pretty good contrast. I was short and dumpy, and he was, as you know, thin, tall, and a presence. And that play requires relationships by the playwright and within the character, but also a sense of the playfulness between the two roles. We did fairly well with it, apparently. It sold out, which was an unlikely matter, for 2 weeks. And then, a summer later, friends had heard of this, and we were in Kentucky because Ken was employed early to work with the professional company that had evolved in our work, doing the lights each summer for a show, the Joe play that, if you know Ken, you know he was involved with. And many friends said, "Please, do this show for us." Well, we were dark on Sunday night, and so we were over-persuaded by good friends. And as I recall, with one read-through, one block, and one run-through, we were there months after we had done the show before, which was a disaster from our point of view. But there we were, as Stuart was saying, in a knee-deep pudding, and it was boiling hot. And there was a moment when, and there were 300 people there on that dark Sunday night under the trees, and Ken turned to me, and there was one of those moments that Beckett made many of, little nuances of which the audience had to come into it while they were thinking about what we'd just done. He turned to me and said, "I'm lost." Thanks to Beckett, we could get away with this. I said, "So am I." He said, "Can we get out of it?" I said, "We will." He said, "You do it." I'm here. We got out of it. Fortunately, the audience was lost with us and didn't know we were lost together, so it was fine. And then I remember him as a Trinculo in an everyman production that toured through the States of The Tempest. Now, this was Jeweler's work. You know, you may not think of him as an actor unless you saw him, because he rarely did anything on the stage. But when he did, it's yours for the rest of your life. He made the exchange between the time and the achievement, so it was ours. That was wonderful work. And in all the reviews from the Midwest to the Southeast and to the Northeast, every production, Ken's work was cited, and believe me, appropriately cited, for the exquisite detailing of that work. Truly, jeweler's art. And then there was the tortoise and the hare. Now, Ken was to create, and we soon realized this was what I would call the Aristotelian tortoise. The tortoise in the mind of God before he worked with the material. It was a character he would play more than 600 performances on 3 European tours, 5 national tours. And it was marvelous work. One small story. There was a reception in Peoria, as I recall, in a beautiful home after a week of performances, and we were playing in rep with the Job in this piece in contrast, and there was a great dinner party, and you know, we're all hungry in the theater, always, particularly if somebody else is cooking. And we were there hungry, and there was a lady there with a little boy who had seen 2 performances of Tortoise and Hare, and he was not a minute over 3.5 years. So she wanted him to meet Ken Holamon. And Ken, ever thoughtful, got on his knees, so he was nearly the same height as the boy, looked him in the eye, was introduced to him, and his mother said, now, do you know what role he played? The boy shook his head. She said, he was a tortoise. There was such a shock on that little boy's face. He was so trustful of his mother till that moment, probably never trusted her again. Long pause, and then he said to Ken, and I witnessed this, he said, you aren't a tortoise. You've got teeth. Ken's sense of detailing had led, of course, to black dentures when he played the role. So remember that about children. You know, it's all downhill after we're 5 anyway. They don't miss a tick. Ken rose, said, I'll be back. Went out to the charter bus that we lived out of a great deal of the time, went through the tortoise prop box, picked up his dentures, brought them in, got in front of the little boy, inserted them, and they became friends for life. I'm sure there is a young man now in his late 20s in Illinois who will never forget that evening with his friend, this strange tortoise who talked to him, and no one ever believes him, of course. That's the kind of story that Ken is for that young man and for us now that I've shared it with him. Then I remember him as a young artist and an organizer, and now that's getting closer to home. And I need not say that because there's infinite variety in your experiences. I do want to mention one experience with him though, well, 2 teeny ones. At the Church of St. Mary Redcliffe in Bristol, where we were playing a cantata version of St. Paul's Epistle to the Romans and the Job, Ken came to me and said, come with me out in the churchyard. And there was a little headstone inscribed, the Church Cat, 1917, 1929. He said, this is good enough for me. And at Liverpool Cathedral, largest church structure on earth, larger even than St. Peter's, where we played in heights, believe me, that the great scene designers of the earth dreamed of on their palettes but could never achieve in any theater, with shadows 140 feet high and depths of 300 yards and sound that prolonged songs up to 15 seconds. Ken, none of us ever got over that night of those enormous images and the marriage of language, architecture, space, passion, shadows. And almost the last time I saw Ken, which was in San Diego a couple of years ago, I believe it was then, he mentioned this again as perhaps the most extraordinary moment he had ever seen in terms of stage work. This hung with him. Now, I would like to say also as traveling companion, as Stuart has mentioned, because we became not only students, teachers, employers, employees, fellow artists, but also friends. We made several trips together. There are 2 that I will close with. In the trip to East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania 3 years ago, last July, Ken met us sitting in the shadows of the old Norfolk Hotel because Shirley, my wife, and I were delayed getting there by 24 hours. We came in and up to the hotel at 1:30 in the morning, and out of the shadows from a rocker in a white safari hat and a white safari suit, and amid a circle of cigarette butts, emerged Ken to welcome us to Kenya and the Norfolk Hotel. And the other is that we went ballooning over the Masai Mara about 2 weeks later. And the balloons were so small that there were 5 of us in our party. They would take only 4 plus the operator. So I was in one, which gave us photographic possibilities, of course, of each other. And that's my favorite picture of Ken, as we ballooned across that time in that early morning light. Now, such a gift of so many images for the 28 years. How lucky we are. How we rejoice in him. There's but one word for Ken, and it belongs to the Hebrews, to life, Lakaya.
Once upon a time, a cat, after his 9 lives, came back as a designer of sets. A colleague, a friend, a set designer who is due back as an old lion with another 9 lives. Ken was sure he had been a cat, just as he was sure that he would come back as another more sage, reposed feline. In the meantime, between purr and roar, he did 1,001 things on stage or about it. And I was the luckiest of all, as was every being that got to work with Ken. I got to reach the Kabbalistic number 13, 13 works, 13 productions, that we dreamt and realized together. The plan was that by now it was going to be 12. But when he said to me that AIDS was heralding his next feline reincarnation, I promptly scheduled the 13th production out of sheer self-indulgence. One more show with Ken. One more show with a birdcage somewhere as a signature, a wink. With Ken, I did not have to explain ideas, concepts, or approaches. None of us, lucky ones, had to. Ken was always tuned into our minds, into our thoughts, the thoughts of the creative team. He was a glue that nurtured the teams that since Albert Herring in 1985 kept us producing some of the most rewarding productions that we could have ever hoped for. And he left all that to us. Tartuffe, Le Nozze di Figaro, The Medium, West of Washington Square, The Barber of Seville, Hotel Eden, The Pearl Fishers, Vanessa, L'Ormindo, The Turn of the Screw, The Magic Flute, Phaedra. He has left us the inspiration, the joy, the accomplishment, the love for the business of bringing things to the stage. With Ken was sovereign to enjoy the triumphs when the work reached the souls of many. And it was joyous to share in philosophical awe the responses to the less understood projects. But it was always because of the sincerity of his creative mind that his work remains indestructible, honest, true to the deepest thought process. Thank you, friend, thank you, colleague, and give us a roar all live.
I think Dwight McBride will agree with me when I say that a very special relationship forms between a set designer and his technical director. You start to see things in the same way. You start to share the same aesthetic. Hell, I even started to like glitter. Anyway, the faculty at Santa Clara University. Back in those days, we produced a summer theater season. It usually consisted of a musical and a straight play and a children's show. Now, as seems to be always the case with summer seasons, we were on a shoestring budget, we had very little money, and to make matters worse, we didn't have our ready pool of theater students available to us to work in the scene shops and staff our shows and whatnot. So we were really kind of up against it. Well, out of sheer dumb luck, we concurrently with this summer season offered this theater appreciation course. It was very simple. All you had to do was sign up for the course. You were then plugged in to work in the scene shop or the costume shop or one of the run crews. And if you showed up and did a pretty decent job, your chances of getting a good grade were very great. Well, because of this, this class quickly became a favorite of the athletic department. Summer was that special time where most universities' athletic departments got their starting lineups academically eligible for the fall. So we had a great number of athletes working in our scene shop and whatnot. And this one summer we had this, I think I had the entire offensive and defensive line working in the scene shop, and we had this one individual called Bubba. Now, Bubba was a mountain of a man. He was a left offensive tackle. He was about 6'4" and weighed at least 300 pounds. Just an imposing presence. And on top of this, he had a demeanor that would have just struck fear into any middle linebacker, let alone us gentle theater folk. He would come into the shop and I would explain to him what I wanted him to do, and he would, with this grim, threatening look, nod and go over and do what he needed to do, and then I'd say, Bubba, it's time to go home, and he'd nod, put his tools away, and never say a word. And this went on for a couple of weeks. Well, one day I get a call from Ken, and Ken says, tomorrow I'm coming in to dress the set. Well, we used to refer to these in the shop as Ken's Ditz and Blitz calls. He would come in and kind of like a Tasmanian devil, throw glitter and paint and fabric and just do this crazy thing, but make this incredible art and dress his sets. And I tried to always put my more artistic, artsy-craftsy students with him on these projects. It seemed to make sense. But this one day, everybody that I had was in the middle of a really important project that they needed to finish, except Bubba. I didn't think this was a match made in heaven. But I was stuck. So when Ken came in that day, I sent everybody off to their various jobs, and Ken stepped forward and said, well, where's my helper? And I said, Ken meet Bubba. Well, I remember it like it was yesterday, because Ken was about 5 feet away from me, and Bubba stepped in between us, and Ken just completely disappeared. And from the other side of this mountain of a man, I hear, hi, Bubba, I'm Ken, let's go to work. So this odd couple went off to work. I kept an eye on him for a while because I was a little worried how this whole thing would come out. And Ken started to explain what he needed Bubba to do. It was something like, I don't know, cut out 147 cherubs or something like that. And Bubba's face and expression got darker and grimmer. And it was really looking pretty bad, but he at the end nodded that he understood what was to be done without saying a word, and they started to work. Well, I had other things to do, so I went off, and it was about 45 minutes time that I came walking back through the shop. I'd forgotten about these two altogether, and I get about halfway across the shop, and I hear this deep, big, rich belly laugh, the type of laugh that you just start laughing and smiling before you ever hear who it's coming from. And I looked in the corner, and this laugh was coming from Bubba. Well, Ken had decided that he was going to give a graduate-level lecture to this kid on the history of the American musical. And in doing so, it was complete with periodic choreography and were having a famous time, and I looked and I went, my God, this kid's been here for 3 weeks, never said a word, and in 45 minutes, Ken Holamon gets to the middle of this guy like that. Well, Bubba had all kinds of hidden talents, as it turned out. He became an integral part of that summer season, worked on run crews and everything else, and enjoyed working with Ken a great deal. And in working with Ken, apparently at some point along the line, he mentioned to Ken that, boy, it's really kind of interesting that I'm on the run crew of a play because I've never seen one before. Well, I can only think of the horror that this must have struck in the heart of good Mr. Holamon. So Ken decided that he was going to do something about this situation. So normally we just told the kids, well, this is how you go about getting comp tickets. Well, this wasn't good enough for Ken in this instance. So he went, he got the tickets, brought them back, told Bubba, you're going on this day, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and by the way, get a date. He figured if he had a date, the kid couldn't back out. Well, sure enough, Bubba showed up and saw his first play, thanks to Ken. And I was backstage after it when he came back. And he came backstage, Bubba that is, and he had sort of this euphoric, glazed look on his face that I imagine most of us in this room had the first time that we ever saw a show. He just looked like he'd seen the most miraculous thing in the world. And he went immediately to his friend Ken, and they started excitedly talking about what he had just seen. And I looked at Ken, and he got that same look on his face, that same glaze, that same euphoria. And I thought, my God, with all that this man has done and all the shows that he has produced, he's still somehow able to look at these things as if for the first time, to still see the joy and pull that out of it. And I don't think I ever saw Ken quite so happy, because that night he had taken that thing that was so joyful for him and he'd given it to another human being. I'm sure one of hundreds. But he had taken that thing, that love of his, and he'd given it away. And so happily given it away. So when I think back on my friend, I don't think about any one particular production. I just think about the bond that grew between us. But I also think about the joy that he gave us, the joy that he lived his life. And I think the greatest tribute any of us could give him would be to try and hold on and perpetuate that joy in our work and our lives. Thanks.
The microphone is here if someone wishes to come up and share some stories with us.
My name is Paul Manchester, and I have to clarify something. A lot of people have come up to me and looked at this and said, Ken's beard sometimes was a little scruffy, but come on, that is Ken when he was playing Merlin backstage. I'd been taking pictures of Camelot from the lighting booth, and Merlin had just gone off with what's her face? He was waiting for bows, and he was, just in his old Levi shirt and everything. He was hanging out, and I had the camera, so I was taking pictures, and I took a picture of him, and anyway, that's how that came about. It was about a year after I'd begun assisting him, and I was about my 4th year of college, on my 3rd major, I think. Actually, I began as a theater major, and I kind of graduated as a theater major, but I did a lot of step in between. One of the most wonderful things, I think, well, so many wonderful experiences, but as a student and as now, I really wasn't very coordinated. And it was like maybe my 2nd or 3rd show with him. It was a Servant of Two Masters with San Jose Rep. We'd been working long hours, and at that time especially, I wasn't particularly fast keen. It had been a long, long day. And of course, we're on a timeline and everything. And Ken is being very patient. And anyway, I'd spent all day doing this lettering, saying Servant of Two Masters. And I was up in this tall ladder with this big thing of black paint, and I dropped the can onto what I've been working on all day long, obliterated. And of course, I was horrified. I mean, I was so impressed with Ken. Ken was such, this professional that I looked at, and I, God, wow. And I always will remember his response. He just stopped and breathed. That's okay. And he dealt with it, and did it over, stayed a little longer, and it worked out fine. That was the end of it. And it's come back to me in times since then when, I've had assistants working for me and they do something where you want to go, and stop, and breathe. And he was always very calm. He taught me so much, but he taught me a lot about being an artist and being a businessman. And that was incredible. I've learned a great deal from him. Anyway, I've been going back through a lot of his letters that he wrote, and a lot of us got Christmas letters, I'm sure. And one of his, something struck me, I just wanted to read it. This is from Christmas of '91. This year, I'd like to end my seasonal greeting to you all with a story from the trip. It encapsulates that very special time and is my single most recurring image of 1991. Though we had been blessed with glorious weather for most of the trip, our last morning in Venice saw us entrapped in a shroud of dense fog. The vibrant colors of St. Mark's were lost in a fuzzy gray film that made it impossible to distinguish even the boldest detail. Fellini couldn't have created a more surreal vision of the dazzling city. Our eyes were unable to clearly focus because of the mist, and our ears heard only dampened sounds. What we knew were the sounds of boats splashing against their moorings, sounded more like memories than realities. Luggage in hand, the three of us boarded the Vaporetto for our last trip up the Grand Canal to the train station. Although it was bitter cold, almost everyone on the boat had chosen to stand outside rather than go into the relative warmth of the cabin. We stood huddled together, watching fuzzy, ill-defined images of magnificent palaces along the canal float into and out of focus, as we passed only a few feet from the crumbling foundations and creaking mooring posts. Fog so thick you couldn't see from one side of the Grand Canal to the other, wrapped around us and isolated us. Though the boat was crowded, nobody spoke. Everyone was in his or her own private world, abandoned and alone, absorbing in the remarkable experience. We traveled for a long time in silence, wrapped in our winter woolies and our own private thoughts. And then Betty leaned over to me and whispered, "It's like floating from one happy past life into another." And it was. Now that 1991 is about to become a past life, my holiday wish for all of us is that we can float gracefully and happily into 1992. I hope your holiday season is filled with joy and health, and with very special friends and family with whom you may share it. I hope all the prevailing sense of peace we experienced that morning in Venice will be yours in 1992. Best of the season to each and every one of you. It just struck me, whatever the metaphysical, I don't know, but he's not gone. He's just gone on to another chapter. He's still here. He's made an indelible imprint on my life. And he's probably been one of the most, he's changed my life more than probably anybody else I could think of in my life. Anyway, I just wanted to say I appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
My name's Kevin, and I just wanted to relate a perspective from the actor's standpoint. When I first started doing Civic Light Opera in '81, I'm not sure what the show was. I think it was Music Man or one of those. I just remember for the 3 years that I did Civic Light Opera, not professionally, I remember being able to go into the rehearsal hall and see the renderings that Ken had drawn up and going to myself, wow, I'm going to be able to jump into that painting someday soon and perform. And it was something that I always looked forward to. And whenever I met Ken at cast parties or working or anything like that, it was always a delight to meet the man who made the paintings. So that's my story.
Pulling the ace out of the manhole, Paul Manchester drew this. Of course, when Ken said it, he was going to pull an ace. He didn't say out of a manhole, but it... Those around the table that night had this shirt. I talked to Ken maybe for 50 times over the phone before I met him the first time on the first show he designed for the Civic Light Opera, Hello Dolly. And then he finally showed up the last couple of weeks to do the show, and Stuart brought him to the alley of the shop and dropped Ken off, and I'm walking over to say hi to Ken. He walks right by me. He goes over and he starts climbing on the store. He climbs up the wall, and swings on the beam, and all these things he had us incorporate into it. And I learned something as we did. Ken told me more than 24 shows I built that he designed. He built playgrounds. He did. 2 Gentlemen of Verona, Dolly. We had just finished this great big 7-foot diameter spinning wheel that he really didn't design the show, but he helped figure out the artwork on it, that in Annie Get Your Gun, that Annie was going to be strapped to and be spun around on. And we had just finished it, and Ken was going to help paint it. And Steve Kennedy and myself were kind of proud of it because it seemed to work. And we were And Ken ran in the shop, and he jumped up on it and said, "Spin me! Hurt me! Spin me!" Steve Kennedy and I stood there spinning him around. My reputation is not quite as nice as a lot of people's reputation. I was known as being a little bit bitchy and intense at times. All I can say is you should have seen me before I met Ken. Think about it. Ken said, "Don't put my artwork up," even though how do you get away from it? It wasn't Ken the designer. It wasn't Ken the artist. We're here because of the person Ken was. My God, the only time in dozens of shows he ever got mad at me was when I let myself get too far down in the dumps. Boy, I mean, sincerely bawled out by him just for that. I'm sure he was a great artist. So I hear. The last time I talked to Ken, I said, "Okay, Ken, you say you're well adjusted to all this, and you say you believe in reincarnation. What do you want to come back as?" And he kind of thought it would be nice to come back as that black cat Midas sitting on his bed so he could just lay around for a while. Thank you.
I was one of those back in 1971 who had the privilege of touring with Everyman Players and playing with Ken in the Tempest that Orlin mentioned a few minutes ago. And Ken was a marvel to be with on stage. You know, it's so wonderful when you're on stage with somebody and it's going well. It's wonderful. But as happens in theater, as in life, and sometimes things don't go so well, and you've got somebody on there with you who can come through for you, it's even better. We were in Indianola, Iowa one night playing a performance. I was playing Stefano, the drunken butler, and Ken was playing Dracula. And we had a wonderful actor from Nashville named Clay Harris who was playing the hideous, deformed slave Caliban. And we were in the scene where Caliban is talking to Stefano and Trinculo and trying to convince them to go up and murder Prospero. Burn all his books, which is where he gets his power from. Burn his books, and we'll take over, and we'll be the rulers of the island. And all of a sudden, this marvelous actor, Clay Harris, it never happened to him before, it never happened to him again. All of a sudden, he lost his line. It happens occasionally. I mean, it happened to Laurence Olivier, I've been told. All of a sudden, he lost his line. He didn't know where he was, and the last line that he'd said was, "Burn but his books." And he began to walk around in a circle on the stage, and he began to say, "Burn but his books. Burn but his books." Well, after he made a couple of circles on the stage and said this about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 times, we kind of got the idea that he was sort of lost. He wasn't really back here. So I kind of tossed a line to him, and he picked up, and he went on, and he recovered, and we went on. But in doing so, we skipped a little portion there. And it wasn't a bad thing. We didn't destroy the play or anything, but as Shakespeare had written the play, and as Orland had directed it, there was a time when Trinculo came over, and Stefano, being a bully as well as a drunkard, chased him away. And a few minutes later, he comes over again, and Stefano this time chases him away again and hits him. And then after it's all worked out, that yes, we will go up and murder Prospero and take over, Stefano turns to Trinculo and says, "Come, Trinculo, take my hand. I'm sorry I beat thee." Well, this particular night, when Clay wandered around and burned with his books, we skipped a little section where Trinculo comes over the second time. So he didn't come over. He didn't get hit. He didn't get chased away a second time. So we're coming up to that. "Come, Trinculo, take my hand. I'm sorry I beat thee, but I didn't beat him." So I said, "Okay, all right. Come, Trinculo, take my hand. I'm sorry I chastised thee." So the next week we were down, that was in Indianola, Iowa. The next week we were at the University of Texas in Austin, getting ready to do The Tempest again. We're back in the dressing room. We've got our costumes and makeup on. The curtain hasn't risen yet. We're standing there, the three misshapen musketeers that we are. And all of a sudden, Ken turns to me and says, "Okay, Ballard, what's it going to be tonight? You going to beat me or chastise me?" He was marvelous to work with as an actor. I also worked on Tortoise and the Hare, and during the Everyman Players, we all had on-stage assignments and off-stage assignments. And one of my off-stage assignments was to help Ken get into his costume. And you say, "Well, gee, he was a pretty good big boy. Couldn't he dress himself?" Well, yes and no. You see, Irene had designed a tortoise shell for him, which was made out of fiberglass and weighed approximately 20 pounds. So after he put on his outer clothing, the tortoise shell fastened on with a series of hook and eyes down the side and across the back of the neck. He couldn't get into it by himself, and once he was in it, he couldn't get out of it by himself. So it was my job to hold the shell behind him, and one of the girls in the company would fasten the shell with a series of hooks and eyes. And the first year I was with the company, Judy Keyes helped me. I would hold the shell, she would fasten the hook and eyes. And the second year was Kathy Parsons. And we used to have so much fun because Judy and I would look at Ken and we'd say, "You better be nice to us, cowboy. We're going to leave you hooked up that darn thing." In the second year, Kathy was such a lady. She spoiled all my fun. Anytime I threatened Ken like that, she'd say, "No, he doesn't mean that. Stop it. I'll get you out of it if he won't." You know? So she completely destroyed all my fun. But he was marvelous to work with as an actor. And the last thing I want to say is my wife, Brenda, wanted desperately to be here today. And she couldn't because she got a job, and she's having a costume fitting in L.A. today for a job that will shoot later this week. And I said to her, I think Ken would be the first to approve of why you're not here. He'd say, "You got work, go do it." But she did say to me, she said, "Sometime today, between 3 and 3:30, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to stop for a few minutes. I'm going to say, Ken, this one is for you." And she was going to give the bunny laugh that she used to give as the bunny in The Tortoise and the Hare. And those of you from those days who remember that laugh can never forget it. And those of you who weren't there and have never heard it, I do it for you right now, but I can't do it. She's the only one I've ever met that I know that we can do it. Those of you remember. And I just want to say to you, Troy and Francis, Thank you so much for having Ken Holamon, and thank you doubly for sharing him with all of us.
You can write your stories in the book at the back of the room, or at least put your name, at least that. So there is on the back table, there's a sign up for all of you who have been here today. Now I believe we have a sing-along, is that right?
So we're going to turn on some lights. On your chairs, I kind of dispersed sheets of lyrics. If you didn't get any, everyone's setting it back there, back on the table, right as you walked in, if you want to pick them up. Ken called my office the other day and left a message on my voicemail. And what he said was he was Christmas shopping for Lobby Shop Day, and cheered him up with a couple little funny stories. So, since you all got to hear me sing, I want you all now to help me cheer him up and sing some lovely show tunes along with us. Along with, we have our wonderful guest puppets today. We have David Spence, Henry Mollicone, and who else do we have? Who else? Billy Levator. So, first one is another opening, another show.
Show.
With all these silver, purple, and pink balloons around, we'd like to give a send-off. So we'd like everyone to take a balloon with you. And for the next few days, the next weeks, the next months, as long as the feeling lasts, just let it go at some time and think of Ken. Ken asked it to be only one ceremony in this, and since that's kind of my profession, ceremonies and all that. And it's called Hug Each Other. And so we have to have a little bit of scripture with the Hug Each Other. And I thought that a few lines of Emily's from our town might be right. So at the end of our town, Emily comes back and says, Mama, just for a moment, we're happy. Let's look at one another. And then she says, I didn't realize. So all that was going on and we never noticed? Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? Every minute. The stage manager says, no. Saints and poets and artists, maybe, they do some. So let's all hug each other, and look at each other, and